Hello, welcome back to my channel. So I was, say it with me, perusing Goodreads, as I am wont to do. I was doing a little bit of reorganization actually on my shelves, and I realized that my contemporary romance shelf right now is sitting at 674 titles, which is not an insignificant number. And I decided to click into that shelf, start kind of looking at things, and it raised a question to me, or I guess I'm raising this question to myself. How many 5-star romances have I actually awarded 5 stars to? And are these romances books that I would recommend now? Are any of these books that I don't think have held up over time? I have been reading romance seriously, I would say, for the past 2 decades almost, and I definitely have books on my contemporary romance shelf that probably don't hold up today, but there's also ones that I think might be underrated or books that I think are popular for a reason. And I don't know, I just thought it might be fun to screen record, go through my 5 stars, figure out how many 5-star romances I have, and also just kind of like talk you through some of the books on this list. I thought it could be fun, I thought it could be a good time. But before we do that, I need a little bit of an energy boost, and that is where Magic Mind comes in. Now, y'all may or may not know this, but I am not a big caffeine girly. I feel like coffee tastes really gross. I've tried over the years to like get into coffee, it's just not my thing. And just generally speaking, heavily caffeinated drinks make me feel extremely jittery, but I'm also a human being, and I'm constantly looking for something that is going to boost my energy in a way that is sustainable and that doesn't make me feel like crap at the end of the day, especially after like lunchtime. I know y'all feel what I'm talking about, those like 3 p.m. sleepies that we all tend to get. So when Magic Mind reached out, I was super excited because their focus is on nootropics for energy. It's got ingredients like lion's mane and cordyceps mushrooms to boost energy and focus, and ashwagandha and rhodiola rosea to decrease stress and decrease low-grade anxiety. There's a few different ways that I know people love to enjoy Magic Mind. You can combine this with your favorite caffeinated beverage, or you can take it on its own as a shot, which is how I like to take it anytime I need a little boost. And it does exactly what I need it to do. I get that little boost of energy without the anxiety that I feel anytime I have something that is like super high in caffeine. I also wasn't expecting this, but I feel like I'm also able to be just a little bit more productive, which is such a nice added benefit, especially in the later afternoon hours as I'm trying to get like last minute work done. It's become a ritual for me at this point, and I know so many of my anxious friends who are really hooked on coffee would really benefit from this. You deserve a little shot of productivity that isn't going to make you crash. And Magic Mind has a money back guarantee, so if for some reason you don't like it, you get a 100% refund, no questions asked. To check out Magic Mind for yourself, visit magicmind.com/chandler.ainsley20 and use my code chandler.ainsley20 to get 56% off your first subscription for the next 10 days. Thanks again to Magic Mind for sponsoring this portion of today's video. Now let's check out my contemporary romance shelf and find out what I have given 5 stars to. All right, so I've sorted my shelf already by 5-star romances, and I feel like it is also kind of sorting by date read. The first book that I'm seeing is The Air He Breathes by Brittany C. Cherry. This is such a throwback for me. I think this is one of the first contemporary romances that I ever read that felt really emotional, that had a different sort of feel to it. A fair amount of romances that were coming out around the same time sort of had this emotional lean, this sort of like Colleen Hooverness, if you will. The Air He Breathes by Brittany C. Cherry, I believe, is about a widow who connects with the grumpy guy next door after she like moves from her original family home with her young daughter. Her and this guy develop this connection that just feels so tender at the beginning and just so fraught with emotion. I would be interested to read this again. I know that I've read it since it has first come out, or since I first read it, I guess, but I'm not seeing like a second read date on this book, so I don't exactly know when I would have reread this one. The book under it as well, Full Tilt by Emma Scott, also has a very similar vibe to it. Different storyline. We have a heroine who is in a band. She is trying to kind of get her life together when she meets this guy, this limo driver who takes her home one night when she's like really inebriated, and they kind of form this special connection. She finds out that he has an illness that kind of precludes him from doing a lot of fun things, so she kind of like gets him out of his shell while he is also kind of grounding her in reality. That one was also really deeply emotional. I think a lot of people have read this book by now. Emma Scott is definitely one of those authors who does such a good job at bringing in kind of the realness, and I know a lot of y'all lately, just like me, have been craving books that are not so smut heavy, and I feel like there are books that were written kind of around the same time, again, sort of in that like Colleen Hoover era. I hate to say it, but like that is kind of just like the time period when these books were coming out, kind of like Colleen's heyday, and I think that you might be able to find some gems if you haven't read these books. These are both kind of throwbacks, but like I think they hold up. I really do. Another book that I think holds up, because I actually read this one in 2023, yeah. Managed by Kristen Callahan is such a fun book. It is not a serious one, I don't think. This author does such a good job at getting you kind of in the world of rock stars. So in this book, we have a heroine who gets hired to, I don't know if she's like managing social media for this band, something like that. She gets hired by the band's manager, and he is this like grumpy British dude. She is the sunshine. If you like a grumpy sunshine story, I think you'd really like this. I wouldn't take it too seriously because I think the Britishisms, if you will, are maybe not accurate to how British people actually speak, but if you can overlook that, I think this book's a whole lot of fun, and I feel like this whole series in general is really fun, but Man is just the one that I think just like really holds up out of all of them. All right, now we're entering interesting waters. Okay, this was a weird time for my reading, past 2017, getting into 2018. Attachments by Rainbow Rowell. I know Rainbow Rowell's sort of like a divisive figure in literature, so if you don't like her, I get that. But I will say Attachments is probably my favorite book that I've read by her. This is a contemporary romance that reminds me a lot of The Office. It is set in an office setting. We have a heroine and a hero who are communicating largely by email. I believe they work in the same building, but maybe not for the same company or something like that. It's been a while since I've read this one. I remember absolutely adoring how romantic this romance is. It's not really smutty, so if you're looking for that, like, you're not gonna find it here. The correspondence aspect of this and the tenderness with which the hero treats the heroine is so special. It's a very like long book too. Not like the book itself is long, the book is short, but like I believe the time span between them like corresponding initially and then actually getting together is quite a long time. So you really get to see the relationship build over time, and I find it really special. I read it at like the perfect time in my life, and I kind of want to reread this soon just to see if it holds up. A book that I'm not really sure is for anyone would be Rock by Anita Sunday. So let's take it back to the time period 2017 to 2019. I feel like I need to address this because we're going to find other books on this list that kind of like fall into this category. So around 2017 to 2019 is when I started discovering specifically queer romance, and very specifically male romance. I was sort of unaware, I suppose you could say, of the sort of like discourse and or problematic elements concerning male romance. That's not to say all male romances have concerning aspects, but a lot of the books that were coming out at this time were written by presumably women fetishizing these sorts of relationships. Now, I feel like the discourse again is like sort of complicated because on the one hand, I think that you don't necessarily have to come out to write queer romances. On the other hand, I do think there is merit to the conversation and the idea that there are straight women writing these romances in sort of like a titillating and like fetishizing sort of way. And I think the books that I read sort of around this time period were a combination of things. I think some were like genuinely really good romances, and I think some did kind of fall into that weird fetishizing sort of category, and I just like didn't really see it at the time. Upon reflection, I don't really read these kinds of books anymore. That's not to say I don't read queer romances. I definitely do. I'm just a little bit more selective about what I pick up, and I feel like I'm more easily able to see when things are problematic now. So Rock by Anita Sunday is an interesting one. I remember at the time really liking it and really liking the angst and the drama of it. I don't know that I would necessarily recommend Rock. It's also kind of how I feel about Vicious by LJ Shen. I feel like this is one of the first books that I read that kind of spoke to a trope that I really like, which is the sort of like damaged hero trope. There's something that I like about this trope in that I feel like when you have a hero who has some sort of like emotional trauma, usually they tend to be softer heroes. They tend to be like the antithesis of the alpha hero that I feel like I was super familiar with reading back in like the early 2010s. I understand why I liked this book at the time, but like in hindsight, I feel like this author tends to write a lot of damaged heroes who treat their heroines shitty because of their trauma, and that's not really what I'm into. I think as I get older and sort of like again reflect more on my taste, I feel like I tend to more be into heroes who have been through things, or heroines who have like been through hard things, trauma, etc., who are healing that trauma and maybe going to therapy and are able to treat people even better because of it, right? Who are able to like be more empathetic people because of the things they've been through. So I feel like Vicious touched on something that I knew that I liked, but I wasn't able to fully articulate back in the day, right? And maybe executed in a way that I now don't necessarily like, but at the time I really connected with. So yeah, Vicious is an interesting one, and LJ Shen does a really good job at writing these like compulsively readable, like bantery books. But I don't necessarily think that Vicious would be like a 5-star for me today. A book that actually is still 5 stars for me is Colti by Mariana Zapata. This is a book that I read initially in 2017, as you can see, and then read again in 2023. Just think that she does such a good job at writing her like signature slow burn thing. I feel like I don't need to talk too much about this one, although I will point out that Colti I think is one of her more underrated books. It's a kind of like Bend It Like Beckham sort of situation where you've got a professional soccer player who has kind of the hots for her older coach, but our heroine I think is like 25 or 26, so it's not like a weird age gap. A book with like maybe a problematic age gap we can talk about is Unrequited by Saffron A. Kent. You have to be in that particular mood for. I wouldn't, here's the thing. Some romances are not romances I would want to particularly get myself into. I think that could be said for like most kind of dark, smutty romances, and Unrequited definitely fits that bill. You've got a heroine who basically like stalks her teacher, who she's obsessed with and I believe is married, like unhappily married, and so she like kind of seduces him, and it's like a whole thing. I think she's in college. You know, it's been a second since I've read this one. Would I recommend it in the year of our Lord 2024? Probably not. But Saffron A. Kent, like, she has a thing and she goes for it. She pretty much always writes age gap romances, and if you really like themes and the vibes of Miss Lana Del Rey, I think mayhaps you would like this book. For me, my taste has changed. Another L.J. Shen book. This one has an age gap relationship in it. There is a scene in this book, a sex scene, that I remember vividly and didn't like at the time, and I definitely would not like now. So I don't think this one would necessarily hold up as a 5-star read, but the series as a whole, I will say, admittedly, is like kind of fun. So a book that I would really like to know if it's 5 stars would be Fighting Shadows by Ellie Martinez. This whole series is about like a group of 3 brothers boxing, I guess. I can't remember exactly what the plot of the second book is, but I reread the first one recently, because I think it was like a friends to lovers thing, and y'all, it was just so bad. It was so poorly written, and it's so funny to me that like I rode so hard for the series back in the day. I'm not seeing that first book on my 5-star list, so I think I corrected my rating when I read the first one. I'm wondering if the second one is better, and if I would like the second one. I do like Ellie Martinez's more recent stuff. I think she does a really good job, again, at like writing those like emotional, I don't want to say Colleen Hoover books. Again, I feel like I keep saying that, but like that's the best comparison I can make. I think like a comparison that people could understand. And when I say that, I don't mean the kind of like weird moral foibles in those books. I just mean like the, you know, like trying to pull your heartstrings kind of thing. Ellie Martinez does a really good job at that, and she writes some kind of fucking crazy like duets. Bane, another book in the Sinners of Saint series. We don't really need to belabor that point, do we? Amy Harmon with A Different Blue. This is an age gap romance, I believe. I think it's kind of a student-teacher thing, kind of not. It's been a second since I've read this one, clearly. Read this one in 2018. Amy Harmon does a really good job, again, at writing those like deeply emotional, heartfelt things. It's so funny how I think I was reading so many of these things, and I think this is around the time too when I was like, I wish people would just do some more fucking. Waiting for people to like consummate their relationships, and I didn't really get a lot of that in these books. Then I like took a hard left into the really smutty stuff, and now I'm kind of like finding my way back to the middle ground. I think Amy Harmon's a pretty solid writer. I think she's written some stuff recently that people really connect with, some like slightly more fantasy stuff. This one was not that, but you know. The Kiss Quotient by Helen Huang. We also have The Bride Test down here. These books are just so fucking good. The autism representation that Helen Huang packs into each of her stories, I just love. I love the way that she writes her heroines and her heroes. I feel like they feel like real people, and she does walk that perfect line between really heartfelt and emotional and just really deeply sexy. And I think in the past like year or two, I really haven't heard much about these books. When they were first coming out, I feel like I heard a lot of buzz, but they're not books that I feel like have had a lot of lasting buzz, which I think is really unfair. These books are so good. If you're someone who also likes the Brown Sisters books, I think you would like these as well. Definitely a different vibe and a different tone a little bit, but if you want like a good trilogy of books, you want to like fall in love with characters who are kind of like interrelated, I think you should pick these books up. They're so fun. Taking it back to Fake Out by Eden Finley. This is another male-male romance. This series was pretty fun. Again, I can't really remember if this one like falls into what I consider the more like problematic male-male territory, but you've got sort of like a sports romance, and I can't remember if this one's like baseball or football, but each romance kind of centers around a different like sports player and their relationship with like sports agents or guys who like don't play sports. I remember them being pretty fun, and I actually do think there was an emphasis on not just smut, but also like romantic relationship development in these. So I feel like these might be a safe bet, but again, it's been so long. Then we've got like 2 back-to-back age gap romances. That's another way my taste has changed, I think, over the past few years. I don't dislike age gap romances now, but I think I'm much less drawn to them, and I feel like I have a hard time overlooking the like power dynamic issues in some of these books. But Birthday Girl I do like. Got a college-age girl, and she ends up dating her ex-boyfriend's dad. It is a book that I think challenges your notions about age gap relationships. I think Penelope Douglas does a pretty good job in this book at getting you to kind of question, are age gap relationships okay? And also shows you that these two have a lot of the same desires in life, which I think is important. That's a really good way at getting me to think these two characters should be together. So I liked the book. I thought it was fun. It was very smutty and sexy as well, but I think this is one of the better age gap romances out there. I think your mileage is obviously going to vary. I think people have very strong emotions and feelings about age gaps, and that is valid. Welcome to the Dark Side, I think, is more on the kind of like taboo side of things. You've got a motorcycle club romance with like the head of the motorcycle club and this like younger girl who's known for a really long time. And again, I think the author does a really good job and makes a concerted effort at making it not weird and creepy, but like a lot of people are going to read it that way. So I think like if you know you're not into age gaps, this is not going to be for you. But I love this series. I think it's a lot of fun. I think Gianna does a really good job at again towing the line between sexy and also romantic. I think each book feels different, which I think is nice considering that the series is, you know, set in this motorcycle club world, and they could all kind of run together, but each book feels different. You've got sort of like a BDSM sort of relationship in one of the books. You've got interesting dynamics in each book. They're all very different, and I think these do hold up. I'm gonna say that they do. Next up, we have The Unholy Moors by Christina Lauren. I read this again last year for like an Enemy enemies to lovers video. I'll link that in the description actually. That one was really fun. Just like this book, I think it's an exceedingly well done rom-com. It's not super smutty, which I think will appeal to a certain audience, of course. Some people just don't want to read on-page sex scenes. I think there's like one on-page sex scene and it's like kind of fade to black, but this book really focuses on the banter, the relationship, this enemies to lovers relationship between hero and heroine. While you may or may not like agree with why they're enemies, I think that we can all kind of agree that this book is so much fun, and I think if you are on a vacation of your own, this is a book that I would like want to bring on vacation with me because it's just, it's got the right vibe to it. All right, next up we have Him by Serena Bowen and Elle Kennedy. This is a male hockey romance that, again, I reread in 2023, and I can't remember if this was a retro video or not, but this one I liked. I thought it was a solid, good time, and again, I think that's because the emphasis really is on the emotions between both heroes. I loved the setting of this one too, and it just felt like typical Elle Kennedy writing. I think if you're someone who really likes The Deal, those kinds of books by Elle Kennedy, I think you would really like this one because it has a very similar vibe to it. It's set at a summer camp where these two guys are like coaches. I guess they used to be kind of like rivals when they attended the hockey camp, and now in adulthood they're like kind of into each other. I thought it was a fun time. Next up, we have, wow, a string actually of male romances. Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. I did reread this one again last year, and it holds up. It is so good. It is so fun. I feel like I read this one prior to watching the movie on Amazon. The movie's also a lot of fun. It's not perfect, but it is a lot of fun. I feel like Casey McQuiston books hold up for a reason. I feel like they're such a good author, and I'm super excited to read their newest book, which I believe comes out this year. I'm gonna breeze through these next ones. Junkie is a fun book, but I feel like could kind of like walk the line between maybe a little bit problematic and also like fun. This male romance is one between a guy who's like really into racing cars and like a frat guy. It was fine. Someday by Emma Scott. This one I remember distinctly is like kind of written around the Thanksgiving time. You've got a guy who's a caretaker, I believe, for an older gentleman's son or something like that, and it's like poor guy, rich guy sort of dynamics. I don't remember much about this one, but I remember liking it, and again, I like Emma Scott. She's also the one that wrote Full Tilt, which we talked about earlier, so, you know, good times. All right, The Guy on the Left by Kate Stewart. This is one that I feel like if I read now, definitely like wouldn't hold up. It's a book about a guy who knocks this girl up, I guess like steps up to be the dad that he should be or whatever. It's been a second, okay? We're just gonna move on. He did Rivalry by Rachel Reed, another male romance. This one is so fun if you love a good enemies to lovers romance. You've got this dynamic where these two are like the top guys in the NHL, and you find out that they've been like sleeping together the entire time. They've had careers, but like no one knows about it, and I don't know, it's angsty, it's fun. I don't know if it's like the most emotional book ever. It is smutty, so I mean, if you like that, maybe you'll love this. If you don't really like smutty, maybe you won't. Moving on to a sea of contemporary romances as I get kind of into the 2020s and into 2021. I feel like 2020 is like when I really started finding my stride and the romances that I like, and I found some real gems. So first up, spoiler alert, by Olivia Dade. This book is about a heroine who is into cosplay, and she gets kind of reamed out online for being like a plus size cosplayer, and everyone's like, oh, that character wouldn't have actually been plus size, like you can't do that. And one of the guys who's like in the show that she was cosplaying from comes to her defense on Twitter. They start dating. It's really cute. I really like this book, and Olivia Dade does a really good job again at like smutty, fun, emotional, amazing, marries them, blends them, swirls them together. Next up is If I Never Met You by, I think it's Very McFarland. The M is not an M sound, I've come to find out. This one, I don't think I would give 5 stars to if I read it again today. It's interesting reading a book and then getting the perspective of people who have the identities of characters in the book. I believe this author is not Black. She writes a Black character, and some Black booktubers have pointed out that maybe the representation is like not totally great in this book. So I don't know if I'd give this one 5 stars today. To a book I certainly fucking would give 5 stars today. Take a hint, Dani Brown. I don't want to like talk too much about Dani Brown and Chloe Brown and inevitably Eve Brown, which is down here somewhere, I'm sure, because I talk about them way too much on this channel, and frankly, I think if you haven't read them, what the hell are you doing? These books are so fun. I feel like I connect so personally with Talia Hibbert's writing, the way that she writes her heroines. All of them are different. All of them have their own unique personalities, but I think she does such a good job at writing characters who are not timid and are not shy, don't take shit from people, and I really appreciate that as someone who identifies that way. I think it's fun to read about like wallflowers and shy characters and people who care a lot about what others think about them, but it's also fun to read about characters who are like the exact opposite of that, and I think that Talia Hibbert fucking nails it. All 3 of the women, while different, have those sorts of qualities, and I just love them, and I also love the romances they get into and the frank and candid conversations that these women have about sex with their partners. They just shouldn't be as hot as they are. Like, the conversations about sex should not be as hot as sex, and yet somehow they are. Twice Shy by Sarah Hochul was really my first book by this author that I was just like, wow, this is perfection. If you want a book with really good mental health representation for a hero, read this book. He has anxiety, he is perfect, he is beautiful, and you have this heroine who is a big daydreamer, which again is something that I kind of identify with. So you've got his sort of like anxiety-ridden pragmatism, and you've got this heroine who's like very imaginative, and they kind of clash, and it is sort of an enemies to lovers thing. They're like fixing up a house together that has been bequeathed to both of them, even though they don't know each other. God, it's fun. Just pick it up. I think this is a book that's highly underrated, and I definitely think you need to read this one. It's dreamy, it's fun, it's a good time. A book that is neither dreamy nor a good time, but I enjoyed, is Dear Ava by Elsie Silver. This is a book about a girl who is sexually assaulted, and for the majority of the book is trying to figure out who committed this act of violence against her. A guy helps her out in doing that. They fall in love. I read only 4 years ago, but 4 years is actually kind of a long time, so I don't know if I would love the way that the assault is handled and the way that those sorts of like topics are handled. But I remember at the time, again, appreciating this book because it felt so deeply romantic, and I think there's sort of like a epistolary sort of like element to it, a letter writing element to it. So this is one that I feel like I need to revisit soon to like see if I could really give this one 5 stars. Next up is Beard Science by Penny Reid. This is one that I feel like I don't talk about on my channel very much, so I wanted to definitely spend some time with you on this. The Winston Brothers series is about these, I don't know, like 7 freaking brothers who live in Tennessee, this like tiny Tennessee small town. So if you're someone who really likes Elsie Silver or an author like that who tends to like kind of stay in a small town setting, I think you'd love the Winston Brothers. Penny Reid does a really good job at writing these romances that are just like so technically perfect, if that makes sense. In this book specifically, I believe you have this sort of like more awkward, shy brother falling for the town baker, who is kind of misunderstood by the other people in her town. Yeah, I don't know. Every book in the series is both sexy and emotional, and I just feel like these books don't really get a lot of talking about, but they're a whole lot of fun. And I feel like just all of the books in the Winston Brothers series are just so fun. And again, I like never talk about them because I read them like all back to back in 2020, but I highly recommend them. I think, again, if you're someone who's into that like small town romance vibe, you should give these a try. We've got a few different things going on here. I'm gonna try to like group them together. First up, Tessa Bailey books. I don't feel like we need to talk about those a whole lot. I think everybody knows Tessa Bailey. She writes really dirty smut. My 2 favorite books of hers are It Happened One Summer and Tools of Engagement. It Happened One Summer, you've got this heroine who is kind of materialistic. She kind of grows from that, but she also finds a guy who appreciates that quality in her, which I fucking love that. And then Tools of Engagement, you've got a heroine who is very, very anxious, very type A, and maybe a little uptight, and a hero who kind of sees through that into the core of her and what she actually desires. And I loved it. Very underrated, I think, of Tessa Bailey's books, so those 2 are excellent. Other excellent books. Real by Kennedy Ryan. I think a lot of Kennedy Ryan's like sports romances get recommended, or some of her newer books like Before I Fall, This Could Be Us. Excellent, excellent books, but Real is really fun too. It's between an actor and a director, this historical film, and I believe the heroine is dealing with chronic pain or chronic illness, and our hero is just there for her every step of the way. It is so deeply romantic, as every Kennedy Ryan book is, and it's so good. You gotta be in the right mood for it for sure, because Kennedy Ryan books are never like easy reads, but it's so excellent. The book that I feel like is more of an easy read is Treasure by Rebecca Weatherspoon. It's a female romance. This one I believe is between a stripper and a girl that she goes to college with. They meet sort of in that like strip setting because I think that one of the heroines' sisters is getting married. They're all going on a bachelorette trip. She sees this hot girl that she's super into. I think they have a moment, and then they're like, oh my god, we're in the same comp sci class together. Yeah, and they end up dating. So it's a lot of fun. I really liked it. It's sexy, it's sweet. It strikes the balance, which is surprising considering it is a shorter kind of book and or novella. I think it's like 100-something pages. I loved it. I feel like you need to check it out. I feel like it's underrated. I feel like it's a breeze to get through. All right, falling firmly, deeply into rom-com territory. I don't want to talk about all of these. Can I just be like 100% with y'all? People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry is a book that I have probably talked about more than any other book on my channel. Firmly fucking believe it's Emily Henry's best book, okay? You can't convince me otherwise. I don't really like any of her other books, okay? The Soulmate Equation by Christina Lauren, again, is like one of their most fun and quirky books, I guess. Like, you meet on this dating app and you find out that you're soulmates. They're actually soulmates, and they find out they actually are soulmates. Yeah. Window Shopping by Tessa Bailey. Who doesn't want to fuck Buddy the Elf, you know? 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. This is such a good romantic book. Again, I think if you like Kennedy Ryan, I think you'll like 7 Days in June. It does sort of have an insta-lovey situation going on because you've got these 2 characters who like hooked up for a week when they were teens, and then in adulthood they reunite and have a whirlwind romance. But the way it's written, I think is really what does it for me for this one, so give her a go. I think you won't be disappointed. All right, if you were looking for a new KU romance author to binge, might I recommend Adriana Locke? The Relationship Pact is one of the first books that I read by her, and I was like blown away by how good this book was. It's set kind of around New Year's. You've got a fake dating relationship between a football player and this like girl he meets in a bar. She's like trying to prove that she has a boyfriend to like maybe an ex-boyfriend. I'm not entirely sure. I can't remember. It's been a second. 3 whole years. But I loved this. I thought this was so good. I've read a few of her books since then, and she has such an extensive backlist that I really need to get through because every book that I've read by her has just been so well written. Oftentimes, that is a complaint that I read about about Kindle Unlimited is that like indie romances are just not polished, or like there's so many spelling mistakes and errors and blah, 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 the writing's not good. I don't think you can say that about Adriana Locke. I think she does a really good job, and I just think she's underrated, okay? I think she is. I think you need to read her books if you're looking for somebody new to read from. Do you remember how I referenced that the Fallen Men series has interesting relationship dynamics? Lessons in Corruption, student-teacher relationship, ooh, hot for teacher, older teacher, lady teacher, guy, younger. Book 1. It was fun. I liked it. Moving on, again, more into rom-com territory. The Roughest Draft is actually, I wouldn't really say a rom-com so much as like a literary romance with two writers who used to write together and now they don't write together, but now they have to write a book again, even though they've had a falling out, and then they bone down as they're writing a book about divorce. I'm not really selling this one, but it was good, and I enjoyed it. Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez is one of the best books that I've ever read. I need to highlight that. I think the 4.3 rating should speak for itself, but you've got a doctor who's getting out of an abusive relationship who meets this younger guy who shows her how great life can be. And I was gonna say bang, but it's not that kind of book. I mean, they do ostensibly bang, but it's mostly about the love and the romance. And like, Abby Jimenez has really changed my mind about a lot of things, because her first series, I didn't like any of the books, like not a single fucking one of them. But Part of Your World just really showed me how great of an author Miss Abby Jimenez is, and I think there are other books by her on this list that I gave 5 stars to. A Deal with the Devil, Devil in the Deep Blue Sea, Waking Olivia, The Devil You Know. I went through a bit of an Elizabeth O'Rourke phase, okay? I'm the first to admit it. I love this author. I've not had as much luck with her books lately, which sucks to say, but if you have kind of a darker sense of humor, melancholy feel to your romance, like you're not really looking for a rom-com per se, but you like good banter, you want some emotion, you don't mind if the guy is a little bit of a douchebag, I think you'll like Elizabeth O'Rourke's books. I think they definitely have a very different quality to them than anything else I've ever read, and I think sometimes that's refreshing, you know? Like you read a lot of the same shit over and over again, and you're like, can I just get something a little different? Like vibes a little different? I'd recommend Deal with the Devil and Waking Olivia. Both are different. One's set in college, one's about a plastic surgeon and like his secretary or like assistant, so different vibes. It's a damn good book. She really does. Terms and Conditions by Lauren Asher. Disney Adult and Me liked this. That's all I'll say on that. Love on the Brain by Ali Hazelwood. What can I say? But I believe this is the best Ali Hazelwood book thus far. Yeah, sure, there's a weird fucking ending to this book, and yeah, okay, maybe there's galaxy print leggings. I can forgive that because I liked the corn shucking, okay? I thought the smut in this book was hot, and I liked the romantic relationship development. I liked sort of pen pals aspects. Hook, line, and sinker fucking got me. And then in late 2022, I entered my small town romance era for the first time, really. I read A Photo Finish by Elsie Silver, I read Love Light Farms by B.K. Borison, Heartless by Elsie Silver, and The Weeds by B.K. Borison, and A Jam by Kate Canterbury, also a small town romance. All of these books are excellent. If you want a good small town romance, might I recommend any of those 3 authors? Elsie Silver, B.K. Borison, Kate Canterbury. So good. So good. In a Jam is, I would say, like maybe the most different tone-wise than the other ones. No less fun, and you've got a kid that is fucking hilarious. If you like kids that are funny in books, I think you would really like In a Jam. The Love Light Farm series, I think, connected with me in a way that I didn't expect. B.K. Borison does a really good job at writing books that are sexy without talking about the actual bits involved, and I feel like I'd never really seen that done before, and I like that, and I can appreciate that, so go off, Miss Burger King. Obviously, Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan was a banger. I feel like I don't really need to talk about Kennedy Ryan books. Blockshot as well. She's probably the best romance author that I read. I mean, like, just point blank, period. If you want, like, an expert at their craft, no questions, no debates, Kennedy Ryan, okay? Thank You for Listening by Julia Whalen was a book that I read for the Goodreads Choice Awards back in 2022. I loved. It's about an audiobook narrator, and I can't remember who she falls in love with, but I remember I really enjoyed this book, and Julia Whalen is maybe one of the best audiobook narrators today, so her writing a book about an audiobook narrator, I don't know, it just felt great, felt full circle, good times to be had by all. Pick it up. Melanie Harlo, another amazing small town romance author. I've read a few books by her. Ignite is probably my favorite book. I think this is like a firefighter single dad romance, and I think a lot of you who like single dad romances would really be jazzed by Miss Melanie Harlo. Especially if you like Elsie Silver, I think you would really like Melanie Harlo. Punk 57 by Penelope Douglas is not a book without problem, certainly, but it is a book that I just connect with on this like visceral, deep, I was an emo middle schooler level, and you're never going to take that away from me. I'm so sorry you're not going to. I don't need to talk about it. I'm not necessarily going to recommend it. I mean, the 3.78 rating, I don't think it's deserved necessarily, but this is not a book that's going to work for everybody. It's a book that worked for me in my heart, and that's never going to change. Another kick-ass author who gets a lot of credit and should, rightly, is Liz Tomford with The Right Move. The Windy City series is just so fun. The books are long, but they are so packed with really great relationship development. If you want a hero who just like dies for the heroine and like does sweet shit for her, I think that you need to read Liz Tomford's books, okay? The Right Move in particular is my favorite, and I think the only one I've given 5 stars to, a book that I don't talk about nearly enough, is Honey and Spice. I loved this book. It reminded me a little bit of Chewing Gum, if you've ever seen that show on Netflix. So fucking good. The heroine in this book, I believe, is like trying to write paper on relationships. She gets into a relationship. It's kind of complicated. I don't know how to describe this book really. It's just unlike anything I've ever read, and it was so so refreshing. I think I read this one for the Goodreads Choice Awards as well, and 10 out of 10. So good. Moving on to some more books that I've read recently, or what feel more recent to me. Meeting Millie by Claire Ashton. This is a book that I picked up kind of on a whim. It was a female-female, or it is a female-female romance that I picked up from Kindle Unlimited. I finally like dipped my toes into the LGBT section over on KU, and I was not disappointed. This was so fun. This is sort of a friends to lovers romance. They are like friends in college. They get together after college. One's an attorney. Can't remember the career of the other one, but good book. Such a good book. I didn't love the second one. I ended up DNFing the second book in the series, but Meeting Millie is one that I think everybody should pick up. Obviously, the front runner, A False Start and Hopeless are bangers. I mean, I don't think I've given many Elsie Silver books less than 5 stars, but I don't really need to talk about the dynamics in all these books. I mean, we know Elsie, okay? We know Elsie. I will say that Gold Rush Ranch is highly underrated, and I think a lot of people will focus on Chestnut Springs, but let's bring it back to Gold Rush Ranch, okay? Just My Type by Fallon Ballard is a book that I think all my high school sweethearts will really love and connect with, and people who like enemies to lovers will also connect with, and people who don't like their jobs could also really connect with. This book is about our heroine who is working for a publication, who's trying to get a promotion, and in comes her high school ex-boyfriend slash enemy who is trying to like take her promotion from her, and so they're having to like compete, make competing columns, and like competing with their writing, and they fall in love, okay? It's special. I loved this. I wasn't expecting to like it as much as I do. I think the 3.69 rating is like way low. Yours truly by Abby Jimenez. I mean, you truly need to read this book if you haven't already. The True Love Experiment by Christina Lauren is, I think, the second book, like after The Soulmate Equation. Equally as fun. It's about a dating show, which I like good dating show romance. I'm not above it, okay? I'm especially not above Out on a Limb, which is a surprise pregnancy novel that for some reason actually worked for me. Even though I would love to be pregnant, I don't really like reading about pregnancy in novels, especially don't like it when it is the thing like bringing characters together. But in this book, it worked. It was romantic, it was sweet, it was kind of low stakes, which I really like. I need to actually make a recommendations video soon on low stakes romances, because sometimes you just want to pick something up without this like crazy, blown out, third act conflict, you know? You just want something breezy, and I think this one's breezy while still staying emotional. Y'all, the lights at the end of the tunnel. I can see the 4 stars. All right, let's do this. Set the Record Straight by Hannah Bonham Young. I loved this book. This is a female-female novella. It's set at Christmas time. It's a friends to lovers, fake dating. Oh my god, it's good. I think when Christmas rolls around, if you are not putting this at the very fucking top of your list, I don't know what you're doing. It's so hard, I think, to come by truly excellent Christmas books, Christmas romances, Christmas novellas, and this one just really did it for me, okay? I think this is my most recent 5-star, actually. This Could Be Us by Kennedy Ryan. I think I like this even more than Before I Let Go. How does she do it? Like, how does she continue to raise the bar and continue to just one-up everybody? I'm not entirely sure. If you could let us know, that would be great. The Fake Out by Stephanie Archer. Let's move on to the last 3 books. The Fake Out by Stephanie Archer was such a fun book, and I wasn't expecting it because I didn't like the first book in the series. I DNF'd it. The Fake Out is just a classic, I wouldn't say enemies to lovers, but like Grumpy Sunshine, where he's the sunshine, she's the grump. She's the PT for a hockey team. He is a hockey player. I don't know how many ways I can say that I love this. It's a fake relationship sort of situation. It's nothing new, really. It's nothing profound, really, but if you're just looking for like really solid hockey romance, I think you gotta pick this one up if you haven't already. Maybe my favorite female-female romance of all time, On the Same Page by Haley Cass, is a book that I read this year. Something so special about this one. This is another friends to lovers. I really love a good female-female friends to lovers story, I'm coming to find, but this one in particular, just so special because you get to know these characters in present day, and then you start getting flashbacks to how they became friends in the first place, and you're like, wow, this hasn't always been easy for y'all. And to see y'all go from this sort of like animosity to friends to like best friends in the present, and like basically codependence, but like in a healthy way, realizing that like maybe y'all could be romantically involved. Oh, it's so good. It's so tropey. It feels so fun. There's a miscommunication trope, but like in a fun way as well. I just feel like if you haven't read this book, you need to give it a go. Another KU female-female romance. So if you have KU, there's like no excuse not to read it. That's all I'm saying. And then another semi-recent read is Brutal Vows by JT Geisinger. Love an older heroine in a story. I can't remember how old the hero is. I don't think it's much of an age gap, but she's like in her mid to late 30s. Her niece is promised to this guy. The niece doesn't want to marry this guy. She marries him instead. It's a mafia romance. I don't know. I just feel like mafia romances are so fucking hit or miss. Somehow JT Geisinger makes them fun and interesting and like not corny as hell, which, you know, hats off to her. Kudos to her, because that's like kind of extremely challenging. I just talked about 75 romances. I actually counted before I did this video. I'm so sorry to like spoil that for you, but I read 75 5-star romances. And if you're curious as to what that means in terms of percentages, 11% of the contemporary romances I have read, I've given 5 stars to, which I would say is not the most generous, and I think speaks to my discernment, perhaps. I'm just not someone who tends to like throw out 5 stars willy-nilly, especially now. So I think that maybe by watching this, maybe you got a new recommendation, something new to pick up. It was just fun, honestly, to reflect on how much my taste has changed over time, the things that I'm into now that I maybe wasn't into a while ago, and vice versa. Fun to see my 5 stars. Hopefully eventually one day, maybe even at the end of this year, we'll see, I'll have 100 5-star contemporary romances, but as of right now 75 is pretty good. In the comments down below, let me know how many 5-star contemporary romances you have, and also, if you can, let me know your favorite contemporary romance of all time. I'm very curious to know. But that's it from me. Again, don't forget to check out Magic Mind. I will leave a link in the description down below. I love y'all so much. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.